We're continuing. This is part 2 of the scoop top. It's got the scoop neck and the scoop or shirt tail bottom. I'm doing a medium where I chained 30 stitches. I said if in doubt, do 40 stitches. There's 40 stitches in this picture. We are working on the rows for the small, medium, large, and plus sizes are approximately written here. And what I mean by rows is this first section right here. It'd be the first quarter of the top, not these sleeves, but the first quarter. And everything will have the same amount of rows. The second quarter of the front, the back, both sides of the back will have this many rows. Mine is 8 for 8 inches. That's approximately this part for myself. We are on row, let me move this, let you know that we're at part 2. Let me move this to let you know that we are now on row, let me catch you up. I'm on row 11 of my medium. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and this is where I change directions on row 8. You can see the change because this is where we started. This is always the top neckline of the garment as it begins to scoop. And here's where you can see the change. So you know where the center of the top is. You can see where I added 2 stitches in the same stitch to begin increasing on this end and decreasing on this end. And look at how nicely and rounded this turns out instead of pointed. That's why we make the increase, decrease, taper direction change a little bit more subtle, so it doesn't end up pointing. I've got my 11.5 hook, and we are now working on, like I said, I'm on row 11. I'm on the second part of the front. So everything we made on this section right here until every section we make, all the sections after this, will mirror this first section. It will either mirror or duplicate this first section right here. So we are increasing. This is the neckline. We are increasing, taper increase on this end, and we're taper decreasing on the other. So let me go ahead and get to this point and just catch you up. So we're increasing. So we chain 3. And we turn over, we turn our work, and I'll make sure that you can focus here. We turn our work, and this is, we're going to double crochet in the very first stitch from the hook, which is actually counted as the same, it's counted as the same stitch of your chain 3. Conventionally, this would be considered the same stitch as your chain 3. I'll be referring to it as a first stitch from the hook because it's both of those things. So 1, 2, 3, and yarn over and double crochet in the very first stitch from the hook, which is actually considered the same stitch as your chain 3. And then we're going to crochet, we're going to double crochet in each stitch all the way down to the bottom. Now this is remember your stitch count minus 30, and get ready to pause the video, and I will meet you down at the bottom, and we'll do the last few chains together. I'll meet you down here. It can be hard to know when to stop for your stitches, and it can be confusing down here because this looks a little messy because you turn without a turning chain, and you begin your crocheting right there. So I'm going to count so I know when to stop. Just a note, mine, when I say our row counts, I just mean this first quarter section because everything's modeled after that. So I have 8, and 8 is my first quarter of my top. Technically, it would be this half of the front right here. So I have 8 because I'm doing a small to medium. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rows, and this is where we begin to increase and we change directions. So there will be 8 rows on this side. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is the end of row 12, the bottom of row 12. The end of row 12, which will always, your even number of rows will end at the bottom, and that's an easier way to do this if you, and if in doubt, make it a little bit bigger. But either way, there's so much give to this, you'll be fine either way. I just tend to, if in doubt, make it a little bit bigger. So we're down here at the bottom, and you may be confused again looking at this. Let's look at it really close just to get everybody started on the same track. See how this can look like a stitch? Well, the reason you know whether to work into this part or not is just by counting. Maintain your stitch count. So we'll go back up here. We count our turning chain as 1, 2, and then I'm going to count by 2s. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28. This is at 29. So we know it's okay. We're going to be crocheting into this stitch, but no further. And that's why you can always double check. You don't have to count very far, very much, or just count as you go, but maintain that stitch count. So we're decreasing on this end, which means we turn our work, and without any chaining, we will double crochet in the second stitch from the hook. 1, 2, the second. And we're going to double crochet in this. And we're going to begin, this will begin row 13, and this counts as 1 stitch right here if you're counting. So double crochet in each stitch, and I will meet you at the top here, and this will be row 13. Pause your video. Okay, we're here at the top of the garment, where we are now increasing, and I will just go over that with you really quick. We double crochet in the very last, this is the last stitch before the turning chain, and then to maintain our stitch count, because you've counted, this would be my stitch number 28. I've got to do 2 because we're increasing. I've got to do 2 in the top of this turning chain. And this you don't have to be real careful about. So you can, it would normally be right here. I just go wherever I can in the top of the turning chain and put 2 double crochets. And when we do the trim on it, which is just a single crochet, you'll see why it doesn't matter, because we'll be crocheting right in here. And then we chain 3. Oops, let me get in the frame, turn our work over, and we're going to double crochet in this see how this would be the first chain from the hook, second chain from the hook, third chain from the hook, and this would be the first stitch from the hook. And we double crochet in the first stitch from the hook, and then continue on with a double crochet in each stitch. Now let me show you something about sizing. If you're making this for someone else, or even if I'm making it for myself, I have a shirt here that fits me. It doesn't really have to, it stretches a little bit. It's not stretched very far, but it fits. And so if you're making it for someone else, or even if you're making it for yourself, you can always borrow, and see how this would be the center of the shirt. You can always borrow a shirt from someone if it's for someone else, or you could just use your own to make sure, just so you know you're on the right track. But here's our center. Here's the center of this shirt, because it scoops down so that you can see. And here's how it goes up on the shoulder. So I've borrowed shirts from other people before that fits them. You can borrow, it doesn't have to be a stretchy shirt, just something that lays on them and fits them right. And look how this is just perfect. You could always measure, get a shirt that fits them, and you could always measure from here to here and see how many inches that is to determine how many rows you're going to need. Let me see. So this shirt fits me, but if it's a surprise or if it's for someone else, look, I'm at 7, almost 8 to the center of this shirt. I also can use this for my first measurement. So the reason this is called vertical size as you go, because you only need this vertical size right here to know how many to chain, and then you're going to keep adding rows until you get to here. And then once you add enough vertical rows, you're going to know how to do the rest of the garment. So you're going to get this section right here done correctly. Then this section is going to mirror it. And then our back and front sizes are the same on all shirts. That's just how we make our shirts here unless it's a maternity shirt, that's how we make our shirts here in the United States. So you see the seams over here. The back is just those two sections again. And armholes are really kind of simple too for sizing. I'm just kind of teaching you everything, so you won't really have to buy. If you want to buy the pattern, great, but if you don't, that's fine too. But our armholes are around 9 inches. About how big our average armholes are for the sizes small, medium, and large. They're around 9 inches. I make them 10 inches just because I kind of have big arms. And the holes for our heads are always going to be around 19 to 21 inches. So you see this is a little less than, this is 11.5 inches wide for the neck hole. No matter how big you are, our heads are all about the same to get our heads through. So that's the reason that portion doesn't change. That will be the same amount of stitches no matter how large you're making it. So some things don't change as the sizes change, and some things do. Our armholes don't change a ton, but they're maybe going to go from 9 or 10 inches to about 12. But that will be determined as we go. So that's why it's a vertical size as you go. We figure out the size from this very first section, and then everything else is mirrored after that. So we're going to continue on. Let me see. Go back to this. I had chained 3, and I began my double crochet in the very first stitch from my hook, and then double crochet in each stitch, and I will meet you down at the bottom. Here I am at the bottom, and you can see that we're starting to get close. I'm at the bottom. I crocheted my 30 stitches, and you should have crocheted however many your stitch count is. You turn, and we're decreasing. We're decreasing at this end because we're at the bottom of the garment and we've reversed, and we're going to put a double crochet in the second stitch from the hook without chaining. Now let me give you, we're getting close to having this second section done, and an easy way to determine that is I knew that my initial, let me turn it over this way, I knew that my initial section, that every other section was going to mirror, was going to be 8 rows. So obviously I'm going to do 16 rows total. And an even number of rows will end up at the bottom. You must end up at the bottom to begin your armpit, which we will. So you can easily see right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here's your center. We begin to increase. So you know you have to have 8 on this side. Excuse me. 8 on this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And see how row 6, because it's an even number, we end up at the bottom. So we'll be doing 2 more rows, and then we will begin the armpit. And the armhole, it's at the armpit. The armhole can be done on every sweater this way. So you don't need to cut and tie or anything. You can shape it. You can even make the back smaller or larger than the front. You can do a lot of modifications, but we aren't going to mess with any of those. It's easy to see. And we're double crocheting, but obviously any stitch would just require that first section to be measured properly. And once you measure that properly and you do a mirror image, and you do the front and the back the same, that would be all you would need to know. There will be a written pattern for a low price if you want to buy it, but you don't need to do it. You don't need to buy it if you don't want to. There will be enough information in the video to do this yourself. So we're going to crochet. As you saw, we crocheted 30 stitches and then we turned without chaining, making this nice loop here because we want these loops to be here. That's good to have those loops. That means you did it right. We're going to double crochet. We're going to put a double crochet in each stitch and pause the video, and I'll meet you right here at the top. Okay, here we are back at the top of the garment. This is our second to the last. We only have one more row on this side before we start the armpit, but I will just go over this with you again. Here we are. As you can see, we're doing a taper increase. We're going to double crochet in this last stitch. Here's our turning chain, and we have to put 2 double crochets in the top of that turning chain. And I'll let you look at this so that you can see. Sorry, there we go. So it's increasing, and then we chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and we're going to turn, and we double crochet in this very first stitch right here. It's considered technically the same stitch as a turning chain. And then we double crochet in each stitch down to the bottom of the garment. Now for mine, this will be the last row we do. And just as a note, because you might be getting to the end, I use the big spools of 100% yarn. Remember, I said if you don't use 100% yarn for worsted weight, 100% yarn, 100% cotton yarn, your rows will build more slowly. You may have to change the amount of chains you do. Just remember that it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you or wrong with the pattern. Cotton yarn that isn't 100% is going to squish down more, is going to have a different gauge. It's okay because we're sizing it as we go. We're making sure that first section fits before we go on to all the other sections. And as long as that first section fits, every other section is going to work exactly the same. Now, if you're changing, if you have ends, if you're using a smaller spool or 4 ounces, you're going to be getting close. The 4 ounces of sugar and cream, the supersize, whatever. If you've got yarn ends, which you might be coming across that, you need to change yarn at the bottom. Even if you do a really nice like German join where you weave it in itself, it's still going to show somewhat through here. So you need to do your yarn changes at the bottom of the garment, not at the top. They'll be really awkward if you do. So just to make it easier on yourself, always put them at the bottom. It'll be fine. I have a puppy who wants to get in, but we're not letting her in because she's a maniac. She's 4 months old and she's really cute but awful. So double crochet all the way down to this very last stitch right here. Pause the video and I will meet you there. Okay, we're now at the armpit. We're now at the armpit and I'm going to show you. I crocheted 30 stitches down to the bottom. I kept my stitch count, and this is just 2 rows. So really it's fun to get the hang of. For a small, medium, and large, you're going to want about 9 or 10 inches for the armpit. Now we're going to leave this armhole open, and mine ends up being about 15 stitches. And this is what we need to leave open at the top. This is all we care about. So mine ends up being about 15 stitches, 2, 4, 6, 8. Anyhow, you want to be 9 or 10 inches for a small, medium, and closer to 10 for a large. For the plus sizes, do at least 11 inches, 11 or 12. You can make it, it's easy to make it smaller, but you can't make it any bigger. So if in doubt, make it a little large in the armpit, and I can show you how to adjust that because our arms are all very different. Mine are really tiny, and you know, the first person I made this for actually did a lot of bodybuilding, and so she had very large arms. So just think about that. I'm trying to give you ballparks. If you have that blouse that fits a person that you're making this for, measure that. And you would measure from the shoulder down to the bottom of the armpit. They're not complicated, but like I said, if in doubt, make it longer. So taking someone else's shirt because you don't have you don't have yourself to look at, or I just take a shirt for myself. You see how I got to between 9 and 10 inches? I'm not measuring this part. I'm measuring from here to here. Okay, to below. And like I said, if in doubt, make it bigger. This is supposed to be loose and open, and it goes over a tank top or something else because it's too open weave. So this is how I got that. And the armhole openings do go up in size. You know, like I said, the neck opening doesn't go up in size with the size of the garment, but the armhole openings do. So I figured about 15 stitches, and I'm going to leave 15 stitches open, okay, for myself. So it doesn't, however many your chain is, you're going to need to leave this part open. Okay, this part is going to stay open. I will show you how that works. So I know that I need to leave the 15 stitches from the top open. So that leaves me 15 stitches from the bottom. Now here's where, sorry, I didn't have this straightened out like I had wanted. Here's where we aren't increasing or decreasing. Here's where we are crocheting normally. We're going to chain 1, 2, 3 for the turning chain. Now before this, we were decreasing. We're at this is the bottom of the garment. I'm at row 16. At the bottom of the garment, no matter what, you do have to be at the bottom of the garment. And instead of turning without chaining, I'm going to do a partial normal row. So I'm chaining 3 just as you would normally. I'm yarning over, and I'm going into this second stitch from the hook. This is the standard way that you would do this. So now because I need to leave 15 open, I know that there has to be 15 down here. Whatever yours ends up being, it's not from here to here that matters, it's how much you're going to leave open for the armhole. So I know that I'm going to do 15, but my 15, this is going to count as 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to crochet 15, but I'm crocheting that amount because I'm leaving this part open. I'm going to let you crochet, pause this to crochet up, and I will have a picture for you. Okay, here's the picture. Now this is actually for the stone point tunic, and it's the layout for the stone point tunic, and it's the same exact layout for the cutout shoulder and what we're doing. So where we're at, here's our map to where we're going to be going. See how this is left open? And the different colors are just the different sections. So this is, for me, my 8-row section. Here's where I started. I did 8 rows. I changed directions. Let me see if I can get this to focus properly. Let me get this for you. Okay, here's where I started. Here's my little tail where I started. I crocheted 8 rows. I changed directions, crocheted another 8 rows, and I ended up down here. Now my decision was how much to leave open right here. This is to be left open. This is your armhole. This is your shoulder. This is your armpit right here. So I'm right down here on my 16th row, and I crocheted up 15. Now how much you crochet up is going to depend on what amount you're leaving open here, what size you're doing, small, medium, maybe large. You're going to leave about 15 stitches open here. But large and plus sizes, I would leave open 18 stitches. 18 to 20 stitches, and we can make this smaller, we just can't make it bigger. So if in doubt, leave it a little large. So I'm crocheting up from the bottom where I ended on row 16. I'm crocheting up and stopping right there. So I'm going to bring this over here. So I'm trying to show you where we're going with what we're doing so you don't get confused. This may be really simple for some, but you can always just crochet while I'm talking if you already know where I'm going with this. But I would love for beginners to be able to make this armpit. You can also make sure and use your stitch markers. So remember, it's where the opening needs to be from the top. This is the neckline from the top down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so I'm putting this in here because I'm leaving 15 open. So I am not going to crochet into this. And what I do with markers is use anything. I mean, I use paper clips, I use hairpins, anything. But if I'm going to crochet over it, I tend to use one of these markers or a hairpin if I'm going to crochet over that. And if I'm not going to crochet over it, I use a different marker so that I know that this would be the stitch I would stop on. So I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to crochet up to this. And please try this. This is really, I mean, I've only had to crochet 15 stitches. I mean, the most you would have to do is 20, maybe 20, 25 double crochets to try to do this armpit, and so it's so few stitches. It's really worth trying. It will save you ends, it will save you time. It makes such a nice smooth transition. So it's worth learning. Don't give up. This is actually the easy part. It's just a little different is all. Your very first section was your hard part, and you already did that, so congratulations. And so see, here I'm at my marker. It's a type of marker I know it's kind of like I can't crochet over it. So I'm doing a double crochet, and then I'm going to chain. I'm going to chain however many stitches I left open for the armpit. Remember what we have? This is left open. What this blue part is this is where I just crocheted up. Then I'm going to chain this many. I'm going to chain however many stitches I left open. Mine happens to be 15, but whatever yours is, chain that plus 1. So mine is 15, so I'm going to chain 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and that's how many stitches I have here that I've left open, and then I have to add 1. Okay, and so I'm going to show you a picture of this, but we're going to do exactly like we did at the very beginning to just make the armhole nice and neat. So I'm going to show you, and what we did at the beginning. Sorry, this is a little funky on the focus. Let me change this focus and see if I can help you guys out just a bit. And let me change the brightness. There. We'll leave it like that. See if that works. Okay. So we're going to, again, like we did the first one, we're going to yarn over and we're going to go in the bottom loop. Remember, we have the front loop, the back loop, and then we turn it over and we have this bottom loop. Real easy to see. It's a little awkward, but we're going to go in the third. We're going to yarn over and do a double crochet in the third bottom loop from the hook. And it's a little awkward. Now we have 2 stitches. 1, 2. And I lied and said we wouldn't be doing that beginning part anymore, but we are going to do it for the armhole. We're going to yarn over and we're going to do another double crochet in the very next back loop. We're going to double crochet in each back loop down this chain. Let me show you a picture of what we're doing. It's not on here. Okay, well, I'm going to pause this and double crochet in the back loop down this entire chain and see if I can find you guys a picture. Okay, I've put a double crochet in each bottom loop of the chain that I just made. So I went up. Let's show you on this. So right here, this was my first 8 rows, my second 8 rows. I ended at the bottom. I did 15 double crochets up, but the amount you go up is just determined by how much you're leaving open for the armhole. So I chained 1 plus however many I left open for my armhole. Mine happened to be 15 plus 1 is 16. I double crocheted in the bottom loop of the third loop, bottom loop from my hook, and I put a double crochet in each bottom loop all the way down to right here. Now I'm at the armpit. Here's a close-up. This is a single crochet or a half double crochet, I don't know which one, but I did it in the bottom loop, and that leaves the inside of the armpit. That leaves the inside of the armpit with all double loops, so it doesn't become too stretched out. See how putting it in the back loop? Oh boy. Yeah, no. Oh, there we go. How putting in the back loop means the entire opening has 2 loops to work with if we put sleeves on, and if we don't, then that means it just looks fine that way. So this is 14 stitches. I'm on stitch 14, so this is a stitch count that matters, and write it down if you don't remember what it is, or go back and count, because you'll be leaving that much open on the other side. So I'm at stitch 14. Now let me show you a little trick that helps. So now don't get confused and go back up this way. I've done it before, and it means you have to rip out 15 to 20 stitches. So it's not the end of the world, but look how to work back. This would be my 15th back loop right here. See, if I turned it over, here would be, or the bottom loop. Here would be the bottom loop I would need to work in. So I don't want to work in it that way because I want to make a smooth transition. Look how there's just a tiny little turn here. I want to make a smooth, this would be the normal back loop, bottom loop that I would be working in. I don't want to work in that because I'm on my very last stitch before I go back down the armpit. This adds our extra inch on each side, this row right here. And then it has a couple, like 3-4 inches of stretch to it on top of that. So this is the funky little part that you probably get down there and you realize, oh, well, that makes sense. But see, this would be the bottom loop, and I'm going to turn it right here because we're right in the armpit. It does not show, and it just makes for an easier transition, so that if you do leave the armpits or when you're working on the sleeves, you're all set. So this is my stitch 15, my 15th double crochet, and then I've just smoothly continued down, putting a double crochet in each stitch down below. So as soon as we get down to the bottom here, I'm going to put a double crochet in each stitch down to the bottom, and you're going to count 30. Okay, we're maintaining this stitch count. So we count this 15 right here, and then we're going to only crochet till we get to 30 stitches, or whatever your stitch count is. Remember, we maintain whatever our initial stitch count is. We're going to maintain that through the entire thing. I will meet you down here at the bottom, and we'll talk about what to do next. Okay, let's count stitches together because I know everybody has to count, including myself. This part is where right here, when you make this part is where you want to adjust your stitch count if you got off. This is really an easy part. It doesn't show. You adjust your stitch count down here, and we'll pretend I got off on stitches, but I didn't. But it doesn't matter. It's where you can add a stitch, drop a stitch, whatever you need to do. It will not show. So we're going to count these, and I need 30. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 29, and this is 30. Now we are going to have to begin. We are going to begin our taper increase, our taper decrease, and our taper increase immediately after this. Okay, so I'm at 30 stitches. We are going to begin to move everything, to move one stitch down this way. Okay, we need to start beginning to taper the neckline. So it will be the same as your very first section that you did. It will be exactly the same. There won't be a difference, but you're going to begin your movement, your taper at the bottom of the garment. So this is my 30 stitches, and then we're going to begin tapering. So I need to start increasing down at the bottom because this decreases up, and I'm going to start this decreases right here. Then I'm going to start increasing down at this bottom to start making the back, and then the back is made exactly the same as the front. But here's where people can get off on their stitch counts. So right here, where this is 30 stitches here, and this is just all done pretty normally, and this is our stitch count, our exact stitch count, 30 stitches. But here's where I'm going to do an increase at this end. I'm going to add a stitch at this end, and then I'm going to decrease a stitch at this end. So we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. We're going to turn our work over, and we're going to crochet, double crochet in the very first stitch from the hook. Just like we did the front, but we're starting at a different end of the garment. It doesn't matter where you start. I just find that this is easier for me to keep count. You're doing the same thing at the bottom and the top. You're doing the same thing when you get to the top and the same thing when you get to the bottom. This is just a direction change. So we had a normal, kind of a normal row, and we're changing directions. And this one will be, these 2 rows are a little, require a little bit of extra reminders, and that's all it does, but count your stitches. So I would like you to, whatever your stitch count is, count this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I would like you to continue on with a double crochet and stop wherever your stitch count is. I will be stopping at 30. And I will pause this and meet. Okay, here's also a spot where things have seemed more complicated than probably they really are. When we were down here, we could have, if our stitch count had been too high or too low, this is where we could have added a stitch or done one less stitch. It's where we could have altered it, because we're working on the back, we're eventually going to meet around to this very beginning, and it's got to have the same amount of stitches to attach to it, or at least within one, just so it looks right and it looks even. So this is my 29th stitch. I'm doing 30, of course, and so I'm just going to put a stitch in here to make it 30, because we're keeping that count and we adjusted it. And then it doesn't matter what order you do these in, you just need to remember at this top part you're going to be doing a taper decrease, which means not chaining anything when you turn, and at the bottom you're going to be doing a taper increase until we get to the center again. So we're going to be doing exactly the same thing, but don't worry about what row that is yet. You won't need to know, because we'll be counting those in a few more rows. So right here, we're at the top. We know we're going to be decreasing at the top, so we're just going to turn it. We're going to do, here's the first stitch from the hook. This is the second stitch. We're going to be doing a double crochet in this without turning, and remember this whole thing counts as 1. And then we're going to double crochet all the way down to the bottom. This is going to count as 1, this is going to count as 2, all the way down to the bottom, for a total of, for me, 30 stitches, whatever your stitch count is supposed to be. Double crochet in each stitch, and I will meet you down here. Okay, here I am at the bottom of the garment where we're going to be increasing. This is my stitch 28, so I'm going to be putting 2 in the very last stitch here. The top of the turning chain from the previous row. I'm going to be putting in 2 stitches to continue my increase. Now let's talk about this a little bit. You can make the front and the back different sizes, especially if you're making it for someone pregnant or someone who has a large bust. This, if you decide, oh, this is a little smaller than what I wanted, make this a back and then make the front, I did 8 rows for the first section here, so 16 rows. Make this first section 10 rows. And first section 10 rows and second section 10 rows. Now there's been times I've worked this whole front with, I dropped a stitch for the entire front, and I've done that and then realized I was going to have to join up with this and I was going to be 1 stitch short. Well, I just fixed it over here, right here in the armpit. I just fixed it, added a stitch. I either added one here and here. I added a stitch and then worked the entire back with the correct amount of stitches to join up over here. It didn't make any difference at all. You couldn't see it. It didn't look odd. It didn't feel odd. Nothing. It was one stitch. It didn't matter. So even if you've been working with a little less stitches and then you realize you're going to have to join up with your beginning chain and you're going to be off, fix it right here and continue on. So, or if you find that you think you made the back a little too small, or the front, you can say this is the front, but the front and the back don't matter. If you decided you made this part a little too small, add 2 more rows. It does need to be in even amounts. Add 2 more rows to this section here. Or if you think this is a little big, because look at this, this is the bottom. So if you're tall and you've made a lot of extra, you've made it a little loose, your garment's going to be longer. But if your bust or your waist is bigger, you're going to make the garment shorter when you put it on. So just kind of keep that in mind, but you have a lot of give. And I made mine a little big, a little wider than what I needed, so that it would just drape longer. But for my daughter, because she wouldn't want it to drape that long, I would have probably made it a little less wide so that it would be shorter on her. But I didn't really have to make adjustments. So you can even I could, if I decided my back was too small, I could make the whole other side a different size. I could make it smaller, I could make it bigger, but it has to be smaller or bigger by 2 rows for this first section and 2 rows for the next section to end up at the correct part. So anyhow, I'm at the bottom, I'm increasing, and here's where our shirt tail kind of part comes in. This decreases up here and then starts to increase. So the back, ideally, I mean, if you want, it's supposed to be the same as the front, but it doesn't have to be if you've decided to just play with it a little bit. I'm going to chain, I'm increasing right here, so I'm going to chain 2, 3, turn it over, and I'm going to double crochet in the very first stitch from the hook, not this very first chain, very first stitch, and I'm going to continue on double crocheting in each stitch until I get to the top of the garment. And this will be my stitch count right here. This will be stitch 30 for me right here, because remember, this weird little part we don't really do anything with until we do a direction change, and we will be doing that in the middle of the back also. You've already done it once, but we'll be doing that again. Okay, so the rows, we're starting to count rows. This row here is directly in the armpit. So we're not counting this. We're not counting this row. This will be row 1, 2, 3. So anyhow, when we count rows, it's going to be a little bit different in the back. It's going to look a tiny bit different. It's going to depend on how big we want it and how we want to count them. I've counted this row before because I've not wanted to add any extra width to the back, but we'll just talk about that. We just have to end up at the bottom. So we'll discuss it when we get towards the middle. So continue on and I will meet you at the top. Okay, this is stitch 30 for me. We're at the top. We are tapering decrease. As you can see, it's starting to taper down. We're going to turn without chaining, and we're going to double crochet in the second stitch from the hook, and we're going to continue down to the bottom. I will meet you at the bottom. Now I realize we have to do a little bit of a check as we're doing the back. The armpit can look a little funny, and it depends on how you count. So let's look at this. This is the top. This is the neckline where we're tapering down. And if we count this as one row, this is 2, 3, 4, 5. Row 5 ends at the bottom of the garment. But we know we need to end at the bottom of the garment to match this side. So these 2 rows generally this row here and this row here count as the entire armpit, and this would start your row 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're at row 4 at the bottom. So just keep that in mind. Look in the picture. These two rows, this row in the armpit, and then where the chain breaks off and comes down, these are 2 rows. These do not count as the front or the back in your rows. So that should make it a little bit easier. So you can see how this would be the blue in the picture, this would be the blue, and this would be the blue, and so neither of these 2 rows count. And so our row 1 would actually count here where we began, or sorry, our row 1 would count here where we began to decrease, where we turned without a chaining. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm at the bottom of row 4. So those of you who are doing a small would go just do 2 more rows, end up at the bottom before you do a reverse. The rest of us need to continue on. Here we are at the bottom. We're still increasing. We haven't reversed the direction yet, so we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. We're going to turn and we're going to double crochet in the very first stitch from the hook, right here, not this one, right here, as you can see. And we're going to double crochet all the way up and maintain our stitch count. We're going to stop at our correct stitch count, which for me this would be stitch 30 right here. And I will meet you there. Here we are at the top, the neckline of the garment. This is where our armhole is open. This is the neckline of the front. This is the back where we're decreasing the neckline. We're going to turn our work because we're still decreasing up here. We turn our work, and for those of you that are doing the small, when you get I'm turning our work, I'm crocheting, double crocheting in the second stitch from the hook. There's the first stitch, there's the second stitch. Those of you that are doing a small, when you get down to the bottom here, you will want to skip ahead to reversing the direction. And the rest of us continue working the same pattern at the top and the bottom of this garment until you reach the amount of rows to match the front of your garment. For me it's 8, so a small is a 6, a medium to large is 8 rows. And here I'll show you the rows again. And we're talking about this first section right here. Now we're going to be on the back, but we're still doing just this section. We're doing this exact section here. And here's the amount of rows that section is. It should match what you already did in the front. And we will continue on until we get in the middle of the back, which is the same as the front, until we start reversing directions. So continue on until you have the correct amount of rows and you're down at the bottom of the garment. Okay, I've done my 8 rows past the armpit, where I don't count this row and this row here because that's part of the armhole. But however you count it, you just will do the same thing on each side. So I like mine a little big, so anyhow, it would be, if you don't count this, you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or because this is the armpit here, I count from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'm at the bottom of my garment. The only thing that matters is really that you're at the bottom of the garment. So at the top here, right here, you began by turning without chaining and double crocheting in the second stitch from the hook. You did this all the way here, and at the bottom you maintained your stitch count and you put 2 stitches in the very last, in the top of the turning chain from the previous row. Now this is where we need to reverse directions, just like we did on the front. Here's our map, and here's where we are on the back. So we've done this, I've done 8 rows, 30 stitches, 8 rows, 30 stitches, 2 rows of the blue here to make the armhole, and then I did 8 rows here, and I'm right at the bottom, right here. And this is where I'm at, so obviously where I'm going is for this section here. So this is 28 stitches. You know, to maintain my stitch count, I'm supposed to be at 30. This is 28. So I'm going to do 29. I'm just going to do 1 in the top of this chain 3. I'm just going to do 1 stitch. Oops, let's get in there somehow. 1 stitch at the top of the chain 3 because we're reversing directions, but we do it slowly so that it does a rounded scoop and not a point. So then I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to crochet in the second stitch, which this would end up being a normal or a standard way of crocheting, in the second stitch from the hook, and I'm going to double crochet all the way to the top of the garment. And so I will meet you up here, and then we'll talk about what needs to go in this stitch up here. Okay, my stitch count is 30, but this, I'm at stitch 28 right here. So this is where we change directions, and this will be easy to see when we look back at it, but this is just like we did on the front. We're going to find, look at the top of this, find this stitch right here, and we're going to put 2 in there to make my 30 stitches because this was stitch 28, so I'm going to put 2 double crochets into, oops, it's hard to do at this angle, into this stitch. And this is where our taper increase begins. So this would be just like on the other side. There's this little keyhole here. It's kind of cute. And this is easy to count because this is where we will see our taper increase start, and this is where we will begin our first row of the last part of the garment, the last part of the bodice, where we will begin to increase the neckline. So on this one, because we put 2 in the last stitch, we are going to chain 3. Let's get in screen. 1, 2, 3. We're going to turn it over, and we're going to crochet in the last, or in the first stitch from the hook, this one right here, just like we were doing on the bottom. But of course, when we get to the bottom, we are going to be turning without chaining. So at the bottom, either this row that you already did, or when you come back down, that's where you can adjust your stitch count if you need to. You also have another opportunity to adjust your stitch count when we do the next section. So you probably haven't dropped any stitches at this point, or altered your stitch count, but if you have, adjusted at the bottom of the garment when you do this reverse, or you will have, and you will have another opportunity in the other armpit. So I will meet you back at the bottom of this garment. We're on the reverse, we're on the reverse taper, and I will meet you at this stitch right here. Okay, I'm at the bottom of the garment in the back. I am right here, and I have reversed my tapering, and I'm right here, and I'm maintaining my stitch count. So this is actually stitch 29 for me, and I need to maintain a 30 stitch count. So I am going to ignore this turning chain and just do my 30th stitch in here. And then just like we did on the other side, now you can make an adjustment if you need to. If you dropped a stitch, go ahead and put a stitch right here. Oops. If you dropped a stitch, go ahead and put a stitch right here to maintain your stitch count. But I didn't drop a stitch, so this is where this is going to go. Remember, this just curves around really nicely. So we're going to begin doing exactly what we've done on the other 3 sections. We're going to turn without chaining, and we're going to double crochet in the second. This is 1 stitch from the hook, 2nd stitch from the hook. And we're going to double crochet in that and begin the decrease on the bottom of the garment. And we're going to double crochet in each stitch all the way to the top. When we get to the top, we're going to place 2 stitches in the top of the turning chain from the previous row. We're going to continue that until we have the same amount of rows that we had on the other side. And you can just flip it over, and when we get too close to the same amount of other rows, I will meet you there. So however many I did 8 over here, so when I get to row 8, we're going to continue on, and you're going to finish this by yourself. So when it gets up to here, I want you to put 2 double crochets in the top of this turning chain from the previous row. Then continue back down, and when you get to here, when you get to your stitch count, which will be here, you're going to turn without chaining, and you're going to do a double crochet in the 2nd stitch from the hook. So continue on in the pattern, an even amount of rows.